All candidates on the November general election ballot running in local and regional races serving the Salem-Keizer area were invited to participate in the recorded broadcast using public campaign information. All candidates who responded by the September 21st deadline were scheduled. The NAACP does not endorse candidates. The candidates did not receive questions in advance, but were all granted equal time for their statements and to answer questions. The NAACP Salem-Keizer Branch is the executive producer of Salem-Keizer NAACP candidate forums and responsible for the contents of this program. Comments and questions should be directed to NAACP Salem-Keizer Branch at salemkeizernaacp@gmail.com.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us for the first local candidate forum hosted by the Salem-Keizer NAACP and other organizations of color in the Salem-Keizer area. During the past summer, it has become clear that parts of our community have been more negatively impacted by COVID-19 and are more targeted by law enforcement, school disciplinary action, and institutional racism. We believe that now is the time to make changes to lead us towards a more just and equitable society. One way to do that is by electing people to public office that value equity and justice and commit to taking actions on those values. So the NAACP and its partners are holding this forum to show that we believe in democracy by being informed voters. I'm Julianne Jackson. I'm the founder of Black Joy, the vice chair of Capital City Surge, the co-chair of Salem DSA, and the PAC chair of the NAACP. My co-moderator this evening is Angelique Prater.
Hi everyone, my name is Angelique Prater and I'm a community organizer with Latinos Unidos Siempre, which is one of the many partners of this forum. I'd like to start by thanking Capital Community Media for hosting this virtual platform that makes this forum possible. It was a tremendous effort. Let me introduce some of our partners. PECUN, Mano a Mano, Latinos Unidos Siempre, Coalition of Churches, Micronesian Islander Community, Sikh Seva Foundation Northwest, Temple Beth Shalom Capital City, SURJ, Save Ourselves, and Black Joy Oregon. I'd also like to acknowledge our media partners, CC Media, KMUZ Community Radio, and KTUP Radio Poder. Our Spanish interpreter for tonight is Bethany Renata, and our ASL interpreters are Suzanne Greenberg and Katrina Watton.
All right, so here are the game rules. Each candidate is going to have 3 minutes to introduce themselves. Then Angelique and I will pose the questions. The questions were submitted in advance by our partners, and some of the questions may come from the audience. After we read each question, each candidate will have 2.5 minutes to respond. We'll let the candidate know when their time is up by simply saying thank you. If you're watching our live stream on YouTube tonight, you can submit your questions via chat.
Before we introduce tonight's candidates, we want to let everyone know that we reached out to all candidates in local races that would serve parts of Salem and Keizer. The candidates you are hearing from tonight are the ones who responded and agreed to join us. Tonight, our candidates are Jackie Leung, House District 19, Brian Clem, House District 21, Jack L. Esp, House District 21, Ashley Carson Cottingham, Marion County Commission, Position 3, Bill Burgess, Marion County Clerk, and Danielle Gonzalez, Marion County Clerk. And they are legislative and county candidates for Salem Marion County. We will go into the opening for the candidates.
All right, so we'll go ahead and begin with Jackie Leung, House District 19. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. First off, thank you everybody for having me here, CC Media Studios, as well as NAACP and community partners. My name is Jackie Leung. I am running to represent all constituents in House District 19. This includes Salem, Turner, and Almsville. As a mother, caregiver, domestic violence survivor, former single parent, and full-time employee, it is vital that we have people in office who look like us, who have the lived experience that we do, and who will listen and advocate for us. I grew up in a small town of about 16,000 people, and it was a quiet, small town outside of a major metropolitan city that was about an hour's drive away. When I was 8, that is when I first learned about presidential elections. I remember asking my mom, "Who did you vote for?" Her response to me was, "We don't talk about that." After that, I learned that politics wasn't something we talk about. And it wasn't until I turned 18 when I voted for the first time. And I kind of felt that passion, that power. But at the same time, I also realized that when it came to voting, I didn't know who I was voting for. I kept asking and wondering, who are these people? How are they representing me? And then I realized, why am I looking for someone else? Why not me? I'm not a typical run-of-the-mill politician. I put community first. It is why I served on boards and commissions at the city, county, and state. It is why I openly advocate for hearing from our community. It is why I ran and won for city council. As the only person of color, second ever, and first API on the Salem City Council, it frustrates me that we do not have representation. It is why I'm running for state representative. I am running to represent the community for the people. And this means meeting people where they are. I do not expect them to come to me. I will go to them. Today, we're dealing with some major public health crises: racism, COVID-19, unemployment, dealing with remote learning, and our homeless community, all of which has harmed our Black, Indigenous, and communities of color the hardest. We need a public health champion who will work on addressing public health emergencies and to be able to coordinate systems across all sectors. We need someone who will prioritize work for working families, seniors, our homeless, all people that make up Oregon. We need someone who will work and who will show up. We need people who have that experience. And as a public health advocate and community health worker, I continue to work on communities on building networks, leadership development, job training, and healthcare education. I will continue to do so, and I look forward to working with people on making that happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and move on to Brian Clem. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to the Salem NAACP and all the partners for hosting this. I think this is a fantastic opportunity. It's really hard right now to connect actually with voters. Going door to door, I think, gets you probably some pretty strange looks. Like, I don't really want you on my door right now. So finding ways to talk to voters during this time has been really interesting. And this is probably the first forum in a long time where I get to see faces that actually look like the entire community. I used to be president of the Salem City Club, just to go into my bio a little bit. And while we had great forums, it was mostly white people. I got to tell you, like, my wife, who's Asian American, was maybe one of 2 people of color in the whole club. And they're forward-thinking people. It's just a different part of Salem goes to those forums and those luncheons than what we have an opportunity here. So thank you for doing it. I really, really sincerely mean that. So I've been in office now in Salem since 2007. So I got 14 years of history for people to judge me by that we can talk about when it's time. But, you know, my background is I grew up a poor kid in rural Oregon in Coos Bay. My mom is a teacher. My dad is a mailman. They divorced when I was 8, and my brother and I were the first people to ever go to college. And we struggled economically in really serious and significant ways. And that was what was so important about public benefits, public services. We got food stamps. I got the Oregon Need Grant. I got financial aid. So for me, at least, part of public service is about investing in people who otherwise wouldn't probably have a shot because they didn't come from wealthy families. And I just want to give back, and that's why I continue to ask for re-election to this job. Now, my wife Carol and I live with our 2 cats, Charlie and Clara, and our preteen, but almost ready to disavow knowing me at all, daughter Kohana. And we live in the kind of McKinley Elementary School neighborhood. She goes to Leslie Middle School. So like most other people, we're dealing with distance learning and what it's like to try and go to school at home and have everybody at home at the same time. And in the legislature, I have been the chair of the Ag and Natural Resources Committee for maybe 6 out of the 8 terms I've been there, or 5 out of the 7 terms. So lots of work that I think we can talk about later about farm workers and the agricultural sector. But that comes from having married a farmer's daughter. My wife's parents were immigrants on her mom's side, and her dad's family immigrated from Japan, and they're farmers. And when I married her, I learned what it was like to become a tractor driving son-in-law and learn about Oregon agriculture. So that's a little bit about my background. Look forward to the rest of the forum.
Thank you so much. Our next candidate is going to be Jack Esp from House District 21. Jack, please introduce yourself.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jack L. Esp, running for House District 21 against Brian, who was just speaking. I am interested in serving the people of House District 21 to improve the living conditions, the employment conditions, and number one issue is the school system within Oregon. I grew up in Southern Oregon, graduated from Eagle Point High School and Southern Oregon College, and went on to spend over 40 years as either chief financial officer or administrator of acute care hospitals. After retiring, I opened a couple consulting businesses in the hospital field until 2008 or 10, I'm not sure which, and which time I totally retired. I moved to Salem about 5 years ago, the Salem area. Actually, I lived out in Silverton for a short period. At that time, I joined Oregon Citizens Lobby. For those of you who are not aware with that organization, we meet weekly at the Capitol when the legislature is in session. We review bills, evaluate bills, talk to the legislators about them, go to committee meetings and testify on them, and actually serve as unpaid citizen lobbyists, supporting how we feel the citizens want their voices brought to the Capitol. In this, I've learned how to analyze bills, deal with legislators, deal with the committees, and I think I've done a very good job of preparing myself for the position of state representative of House District 21. And with that, I ask for your vote and let you evaluate who you want to represent you for the next 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jack. Our next candidate is Ashley Carson Cottingham. She's running for Marion County Commission, position 3. Ashley, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. Thanks to the NAACP and all of the community partners for having this candidate forum. It is really an amazing opportunity. My name is Ashley Carson Cottingham, and I'm running for Marion County Commissioner. From the time that I can remember, I've been engaged in helping people and serving in the community. As a small child, I remember delivering Meals on Wheels with my grandparents to homebound seniors in Central Oregon. I attended the U of O, and I graduated from Vermont Law School. While in law school, I volunteered on a domestic violence hotline. I've always had a soft spot for seniors, and I moved to Washington, D.C. in 2006 to fight for the first ever elder justice law at the federal level. This was a personal fight for me due to an experience my grandfather had in his later years. While there, I ran a national grassroots advocacy organization called the Older Women's League. We fought for economic justice, healthcare for older women. We also advocated for the passage of the Elder Justice Act, which was included in the ACA. I went on to work for 2 different US senators. We highlighted issues such as elder justice, poverty leading to shorter lifespans, America's dental crisis, and the need to increase funding for Meals on Wheels. Since moving back to Oregon and becoming a mom of 2 young kiddos, I've served as the director for the Office of Aging and People with Disabilities at the state, with 1,400 staff statewide and a multi-billion-dollar budget. Now I'm the agency deputy director at the Office of the Long-Term Care Ombudsman. Right now, older adults, people with disabilities, our BIPOC communities, immigrants, families struggling with poverty, people experiencing violence, veterans, people with brain injuries, and those struggling with mental illness. They all deserve a life of safety, independence, and good healthcare outcomes. We need to elect leaders who believe that facts and science matter.
I turned it off, but I don't.
Who follow widely recognized public health practices, who address our homelessness crisis, and who believe that systemic and structural racism is real and genuinely want to address it. Unfortunately, the opposite is what we have with our current commissioners. So that's why I'm running. I'm the candidate in this race with solid government experience. I have strong relationships with local leaders, legislators, and our federal delegation. I will lead us through this difficult time and ensure that everyone in our county is heard and has the opportunity to thrive. When I see something wrong, I must act. Please vote for me, Ashley Carson Cottingham, as soon as you get your ballot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. We're going to move on to our next candidate, which is Bill Burgess. He's running for Marion County Clerk. Bill, please introduce yourself. Bill, I think you might be on mute.
How's that? Does that work better? Hi, I'm Bill Burgess, your Marion County Clerk. My wife Cindy and I are long-term Salem residents. We have 2 adult children and a 1-year-old granddaughter. I came to Salem as a Bi-Mart pharmacy manager, and while in the Salem City Council, I went back to college to earn a Master of Public Administration at Lewis and Clark. I've served as a Marion County Clerk for 15, almost 16 years now, administering over 50 elections. I served as president of the Oregon Association of County Clerks. And in 2019, I earned a public leadership certificate from Pepperdine University. I'm a certified elections registrar administrator through the National Election Center in Auburn University. It took several years to earn that. I serve on the National Election Center's Postal Committee. I helped organize the Oregon 2020 Election Security Symposium in conjunction with the Oregon Secretary of State, U.S. Justice Department, and the FBI. I organized and hosted a 2-day annual conference for the Oregon Association of County Clerks held just last month via Zoom. That's our first time ever doing that. We're used to all getting together, but we got the job done. We were able to get national speakers in for free, so there were some benefits to doing it that way. As your clerk, I will continue to keep the public's trust in administering safe and accurate elections, assuring that everyone's voice, their vote, is heard, and that includes making it as easy as possible for all to vote. The Marion County Clerk's Office is known for professional customer service. We're innovative and adaptable, as evidenced today dealing with COVID-19, with the wildfires, with some civil strife and increased cybersecurity threats. We have a very able and dedicated team administering all aspects of election administration, including voter registration. We also administer the border property tax appeals, issue marriage licenses, preserve historic records, and record mortgages, deeds, and liens to protect property owner interests and to uphold capital markets. I enjoy making government work for everybody. I like promoting democracy. I like helping people. I like bettering our community. We are all presently living under an extraordinary amount of stress due to the pandemic and a myriad of other issues. To address these, we need to assure opportunity for all in responsive government that helps everybody, not just the rich and powerful. We need to elect candidates dedicated to decency and to creating an environment in which we can all thrive. This takes informed voters and a voting system that works. I'm committed to providing the mechanics of democracy to help us as a people determine our own destiny, as I have successfully over the past years. I ask for your vote and your active support. Please visit www.electbillburgess.com. Again, www.electbillburgess.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Our final candidate is Danielle Gonzalez, who is also running for Marion County Clerk. Danielle, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so very much, everybody, for coming and for listening in. And I please want to first thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and talk with people. Of course, with COVID, it's been a little bit difficult to be able to meet with people. So always appreciate an opportunity and all of the work that's been put into making this happen tonight, a digital candidate forum. So yes, my name is Danielle Gonzalez. I am running for Marion County Clerk. So the Marion County Clerk's office, as you heard Bill talk about just a moment ago, that office touches more constituents than any other office in the county. There's more than about 210,000 voters. They deal with marriage and passport applications, and of course the registration of mortgage deeds, and that's just to name a few, which again, Bill covered well. So county clerks are really, in this nation, are at the very front lines of protecting the democratic process. And not just for today, but for the future. And I'm at a loss when I hear officials that pledge their oath to the Constitution and then attempt not to count votes for people. And to me, the only reason that would be to disenfranchise people. The people deserve public leaders that understand the basic tenets of democracy. This is not divisive. Nonpartisan election work is not divisive. The people deserve those public leaders that are advocating on their behalf to ensure all votes are counted. Systematic disenfranchisement of voters is real. It is happening across the country with the manipulation of hours, drop boxes, rules, changes in the middle of an election. By far, though, the biggest threat to the elections this year is misinformation provided by actors with the means and motive and opportunity to insert themselves into genuine public discourse. It takes a person with a fresh perspective, courage, and conviction and tenacity to do this hard work to ensure that our election integrity is available for all. It takes a person that understands that we're at a crossroads. We are not just experiencing a pandemic. We are experiencing an epidemic of insecurity, distrust, deliberate attempts to provide misinformation to the electorate, and these nefarious attempts are trying to destroy our cohesive sense of democratic purpose. About my background, I'm a professional. I've spent 15 years in public service, a bachelor's degree in political science, and a master's degree from Willamette University. I've worked for 2 different members of Congress, and I am truly a nonpartisan public leader. So I ask you to support Danielle Gonzalez for Marion County Clerk, www.votedaniellegonzalez.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danielle.
All right, so we're going to move on to our first question. This question was sent in by our community partners, and I'll just give you a heads up. Brian, Clem, you're first. All righty. So how do you see faith-based organizations, minority and non-governmental organizations, the legislature, and local governments working together to help fight deep-rooted discrimination in Oregon communities? What actions will you take to support and advance Black, Indigenous, and people of color?
Thanks for the question. Well, because I'm already in office, it's easier for me to also not just promise things, but also point to things that I've been able to vote for and do. So the things that I guess I would want to immediately bring up on the second part of your question In April, we allocated from the legislature where I serve $10 million for the Oregon Worker Relief Fund. We also allocated, as you may know, $62 million for the Oregon Cares Fund for Black Relief and Resiliency, and then another $30 million, which maybe we could talk about later in more detail, but it has to do with money for agriculture to protect farm workers. And so voting for budgets is important. I voted for and co-sponsored all the police accountability bills, the 6 police accountability bills. I co-sponsored and voted for those. So, and there's a bunch of other bills we could talk about at some point, but with a minute left, let's talk about the first part. I think churches are really important. I think the legislature and the state can lead. I think government can try to build that coalition that I think your question's getting at, but politics alone can't do it. And I think that in the civil rights movement, that's been the role of a lot of churches, starting with Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King and others from that movement, to put that moral question in front of people of faith and remind us that we are all God's children. And so I don't want churches excluded from that conversation. And sometimes in government, we talk about separation of church and state, but actually that moral authority right now is needed. So I think the legislature can lead on the things they need to. And there are some things that faith-based organizations and local communities of color, their groups can't achieve without the legislature, passing laws on police accountability and reform, allocating budgets. But to change hearts and minds, actually, I do think it takes all those groups. And that's why I, listen in live, either on Facebook or on Zoom, to the NAACP meetings. It's why I, kind of do what I do. I go to a lot of community events that aren't really part of my legislative job as a member of this community, to try and build those partnerships that you're talking about just through showing up. That's why I was out there on June 4th when it started raining, right after the rain dance, and calling for justice for George Floyd. It's just, this movement needs to be everybody, all hands on deck moment here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Next, we have Jack L.S. Did you need me to repeat the question for you?
Would you please?
Yes, sir. How do you see faith-based organizations, minority and non-governmental organizations, the legislature, and local governments working together to help fight deep-rooted discrimination in Oregon communities? And what actions will you take to support and advance Black, Indigenous, and other people of color?
All people, being them black, white, or brown, are created equal in the eyes of God. That brings me to the point that faith-based is the starting point of this problem. The problem extends beyond church, it extends beyond legislature. One thing that where it needs to start is equal treatment of people, such as one of the position statements of the NAACP is law enforcement accountability and body cameras. Now, to me, body cameras are a very astute step forward in this matter. It protects both the police and the citizen. We can see exactly what's going on. We can use that information to weed out the bad, or bad officers in line. And by the same token, support the good ones. Most of our police are good. There are some bad apples in every barrel. Again, I come back to faith-based. That's where the nucleus of our society is. If we got back to that, to a good faith-based community, rather than have a situation where it's illegal to go to church, but it's legal to go to bars, this type of thought from the government is wrong. It is not supporting the basic values and principles necessary to bring a community together and bring it strong. Throwing money at these problems, just throwing the money at it and say that'll take care of it, is not the real solution. We need to dig in, find what the problem is, and address that problem. It quite often takes a little money, but we need to know what the problem is first, and then address the problem based on that. And that goes in any place, regardless of color of the individual. I believe all people, brown, black, white, should have equal opportunities throughout society in job, education, and day-to-day life. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jack L.S. We appreciate that. And Jackie Leung, you're next. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
All right. From our community partners, how do you see faith-based organizations, minority and non-governmental organizations, the legislature, and local governments working together to help fight deep-rooted discrimination in Oregon communities? What actions would you take to support and advance Black, Indigenous, and people of color?
It's a good question. Thank you for bringing that to the front. First, let's consider values. My values center on uplifting the experiences of our community and ensuring that our voices are heard and recognized. We need to ensure that we have representation at all levels, from the local city to the state, to the county, and even federal. This includes ensuring that we have representation on our boards, commissions, and also that we're providing support to all people to help them run for office. For example, I serve on the Salem City Council, and I have called out people on racism and racist actions that have occurred in our community. I have called out harm that has affected our homeless and our unsheltered communities. I focus my work on partnerships from Micronesians, Pacific Islanders, Asians, Latinx, Black, and Indigenous communities. And we cannot do this alone. We have to be able to work together. And we need to ensure that we have representation at all levels. We have to explore training opportunities that bridge groups, doing more than just listening sessions and town halls. We have to move from words to action. And I continue to call out racism for what it is. It is something I personally grew up with, and it's something I experienced when I lived in Iowa, and it's something I still experience as I'm in Oregon. And I want to make sure that those stories and those experiences are recognized.
All righty, thank you so much. I just want to make sure you're finished because my screen's doing a glitch thing. So I want to make sure you're actually finished and it's not just glitching.
Oh, my time was up. That's why I stopped.
Okay. All right. So let's see here. The next person is Ashley Carson Cottingham. And did you need me to repeat the question for you?
No, that's okay. I wrote it down. Thank you. So I think first we have to have legislators and local government officials who believe that there is deep-rooted racism and who want to ensure that we are dismantling the structures that continue to perpetuate racism in government services. So I would first encourage leaders across the board in our faith-based organizations, our NGOs, and all electeds to listen more, to show up, to learn about implicit bias, to check explicit bias, and really work toward creating equity plans that are tailored to a particular community. I think to do that, you have to ask yourself who isn't showing up to receive a particular set of services, and why might that be? So have we done the work to really explore that? Why isn't someone coming in to receive that county level support? And it could very well be something about the way the county is operating. So I'm committed to sitting down with our faith-based organizations and leaders, our advocacy groups, legislators, and others to ensure that we are listening, we're learning, and then we're taking action. Because it's really not enough to just do the listening and the learning if you don't then take strong action upon what you've heard and change the way that you're doing things as a government. I can give one example from my previous work at the Office of Aging and People with Disabilities. I worked very closely with Oregon's 9 tribes. And for years prior to becoming the director, the tribes had come to our program to ask for approval to receive federal Medicaid funding to do work they were already doing with tribal elders. And for years, the answer had been no. And when I became the director, I questioned why we would continue to say no. I didn't see any good reason. And to me, it was just implicit bias. And so I wanted to open up that opportunity, say yes to our tribes, and allow that federal funding to flow to our tribes who had experienced so much mistrust with government, and ensure that not only are you dismantling a racist structure, but you're also allowing dollars to flow to the tribe. So that's one example of something I've done to try to unpackage the systemic racism.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Bill Burgess, you have the same question. Did you want me to repeat it? Oh, I think you're muted.
Other folks would like me unmuted, muted more probably. But I understand your question, if I understand it correctly, that you're talking about how do private groups, nonprofit groups, how does government, how do faith groups, both local government and legislature, how do they all come together to attack our problems of inequity? Well, this is a long battle we've had since, 400 years since we first brought slaves here. But then, of course, our nation is, I think it's 244 years old today, from 1776 on to today. And we have peeled back all sorts of layers of inequity, and we continue to do that. And we've waited way too long to do it in lots of different cases, but it's been done. It's been done with a lot of sometimes civil action, sometimes a lot of pain and suffering by people. But we don't have as much lynchings, at least anymore, other than we certainly saw the George Floyd lynching on TV. And that, I think, sensitized everybody, galvanized world opinion that said, we have to do something more about this. And so now we're waking up and we're facing what these fears are and what the things are that have driven people into complacency in accepting inequities. And we're getting some pushback too, aren't we? We're getting lots of pushback from people. I just had a woman on the street yesterday almost screaming at me that white lives matter too. Well, I'm sorry. We really have to face up to what we're doing and change things, whether it's discussions like that on the street, whether it's making laws. The NAACP, which I'm a member, knew that at least if you made laws, you can change some behavior. It might not change beliefs, but it could change behavior. Religious groups, certainly faith, that's where we really need to attack it. We need to attack it with education, especially with young kids. We need to make sure that people have the opportunity, people have the proper education, people have the proper housing, and all those other things that it takes to make it so that everybody can thrive. And the younger people, by the way, are saying, to heck with what you guys have done. They're accepting people, whether it's for one reason or another. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at, do I have enough time? Oh, I'm out of time. But anyhow, it's a very important issue. So let's get it done together.
All righty. Thank you, Bill. And we're going to move on to Danielle Gonzalez. Same question. Did you want me to repeat it?
No, I'm okay. I wrote it down. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So good governance is built on a diversity of voices. And especially in places where decisions are made, public leaders need to ensure that there are on-ramps that are accessible and available, where diverse voices can exist into positions of power. That means tackling those existing structures that have institutionalized and legalized the exclusionary practices that leads to the watering down of minority voices. civics education is one of the most important things that we can do to make sure that we're including and embracing impactful contributions by people of color in the democracy that we have today. Let's talk about the education and really changing the way that we're talking about leadership in these communities. So I commit to advocate on behalf of underrepresented communities. That's been my work for many, many years. I worked for a member of Congress and worked with minorities as well as immigrants working on their immigration status for about 10 years. And it was a huge piece of my job. And seeing the people that came up through either my internships or through our office, it made a difference in those communities, not just to the individual student, but into their families. So I commit to advocate for that. I would also say I would look towards my personal hiring and promotion of diverse individuals in my office if I were elected. I know I have a track record of including voices from across the political and racial and social and economic levels, but there's always more we can do. So there's always more we can do to be good stewards of the taxpayers' trust. And I would bring that same vision to the Marion County Clerk's office. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate that. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Angelique, and she's got your second question for you.
So our second question comes from community partners for this event. The question is going to first go to Ashley, Carson, Cottingham, just to warn you. And the question is, what is your view on the role of police in the community? How do you plan to address concerns regarding systemic racism in law enforcement and over-targeting of people of color? What is your position on school resource officers within public schools? Ashley, you can answer now.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think I got all the parts of that question. So I think the view on the role of police in the community is where we'll start. So I would say that I appreciate the work that our police departments and our sheriff's department do to keep us safe from violent crime, and for their dedication to protecting and serving. But with that said, I think we need a deep examination of the culture of our various divisions of law enforcement. And we must peel back the layers that include implicit bias and structural racism. So, too many people of color are targeted, harmed, and killed by law enforcement, and I feel that that's completely unacceptable. I'm confident that we can get to a place where we have a just and fair system, where law enforcement officers are able to get back to protecting and serving, and that people of color are not harmed and targeted. But it's really going to take some hard work. It's going to take some acknowledgement of how it's been and how it's been done very wrong for a long time. And we're going to have to change the culture. What I've learned, over my career and heard from so many people in law enforcement is that there are so many duties that are falling to our law enforcement officers that aren't traditional protect and serve responsibilities. So I think we have a lot of work to do to improve our mental health system and ensure that the community is getting the support they need with regard to social services, housing, and mental health care. With the issue of school resource officers, I have gone on record with all of the discussion around Salem-Keizer Public Schools to say that I do believe that SROs should be removed from Salem-Keizer Public Schools. I have heard the stories from the youth that have shared their firsthand experiences. I think SROs are an embodiment of this, the beginning of the school to prison pipeline, and we have to end the practice of utilizing them in our schools. It's not effective, and I believe the stories from our students that have come forward to talk about their harmful and detrimental experiences. I think I'm out of time, so I don't know if I got the whole question answered, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashley. The next person to answer the question will be Jack L.S. Jack, would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I believe I have a couple points that'll take up to 3 minutes. Thank you. I'm going to start with the role of police. Police are a necessary part of our society. We need them, and we need them to be just. That's why, as mentioned earlier, and is on a petition statement with the NAACP, is that fact of body cameras. I think this is one of the least expensive ways of weeding out the we need equal treatment of all people. Like I said before, all people are created equal, and they need to be treated equal. Criminals need to be apprehended and treated. Innocent people need to be protected. Now, I'll move on to the school resource officers. I can see both sides of this particular issue. I would say in the vast majority of our schools, the resource officer is not needed without a question. Most of our schools are well ran, well managed, and are well disciplined. Excessive legal presence can cause nervousness. However, I can see in an area, a school, not an area, a school, where there is inordinate amount of crime, specifically more severe crime, not stealing pencils and stuff, but it's a type of crime that hurts the students or puts the students or the faculty in danger. There I see there may be a need for resource officers to help keep a handle on things. But as a rule, I again say, most schools, they aren't needed. Of course, I went to school a few years ago, but we sure didn't need any resource officers. Our principal and superintendent could handle the problem pretty well on their own. And I think if we have qualified principals, superintendents running those schools, the same thing will happen today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jack. The next person to answer the question will be Brian Clem. Brian, would you like me to repeat the question?
Oh, no, thank you. I got it. So the role of police in the community is supposed to be, as it says in the slogan, to protect and serve. You know, they're there to protect us, but the problem is for too many people, that is not how they view police. And I think I got my first taste of it when I went to college. I had 2 black roommates, and they told me, you're going to have problems when we go out with these Corvallis police. And at first I didn't really believe them until it happened over and over. We'd get pulled over if they were in the car, not if I were. And it wasn't just the police. We'd go to downtown stores to go shopping. People would follow us around while we were shopping for clothes when they were with me. But if I was by myself, they didn't. And so that experience of white people is so different when we view almost anything than people of color. You know, my daughter asked me, am I white enough to not get deported by Donald Trump? Because my daughter's biracial. Like, that is so sad that my daughter can't be proud of her ethnic heritage and instead has to hope the white part of her keeps her safe from the president of the United States of America. But I know that's the real lived experience for lots and lots of people when it comes to police. So I'm an ally. You know, like I said, I co-sponsored the bills, but I didn't write the bills. We have a black-led judiciary committee right now, and Representative Janelle Bynum, and she is with the BIPOC caucus. Not done. We got 6 bills we passed, 1 little cleanup bill. There's going to be more. And someone talked about it earlier. Until we get at the culture that allows people to become police who should never, ever have a gun and a badge, we're going to keep having problems because it's individuals who shouldn't have it, but there's a system that allows it. And lots of us knew who those people were even growing up. And then when you heard that they became a cop, you could not believe it because they were at that time bullies and you know, in my high school, the guys that did steroids and wanted to join the Marines later, 2 of them I heard became police officers. And I'm always deathly afraid to read that maybe one of them was that guy. Now, lots and lots of police are noble, but they need to call out and report and root out what they see every day. And that's why it's so important to have police working with us to clean up law enforcement and make it truly community-based police. I almost out of time, but on the school resource issue, I do want to maybe get back in my next answer. Maybe I can come back to it about our school board here in Salem. Because as you know, our city council and our school board are talking about that right now. And I used my time, so I'll try and come back to it in my next answer.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. And finally for this question, Jackie Leung, will you answer it, and do you want me to repeat it?
No, I don't need it repeated. I think I have the gist of it. So as Representative Glenn have said, the police slogan is to protect and serve. I remember growing up both fearing and respecting police. My first encounter with police was when I was walking with friends to the store. A police officer had turned around and tailed us, and it was terrifying because we didn't know what the officer wanted, and for some time afterwards we felt jarred. We're still seeing the overreach of police officers who've killed Black people senselessly. I worry for my friends, and I worry for my children, especially my sons who are biracial. There needs to be significant change at the police level. We need to reconsider where funding for police goes, and that means investing in other programs that are needed. We know that the police do not often have the training in mental health situations or crises, and we have seen the impact in our communities. We also need to recognize the harm caused by the police. Several things that I would like to be able to see is making sure that police need to recognize and to apologize for any racist behavior, ensuring that there's police accountability. That means documenting and having that information readily available for policymakers and analysts to assess attempts at answering important questions. Looking to see if we could expand upon body cams. Training reform. Police need to be trained to address their racial biases, increasing community police strategies, mediation, conflict management, ethics, integrity, emphasis on legal knowledge. And we can also look into whether or not we could impose state law with specific training that may be missing from the academy curriculum. So for SROs, school resource officers, I've held a series of school resource officer discussions earlier this year on a virtual forum. SROs should not be the first line of defense for our communities. A number of BIPOC students have spoken out repeatedly about the presence of SROs, and the presence of them have increased the number of students from attending schools to the school to prison pipeline. We need to ensure that we invest more into mental health professionals within schools. As for racism, I want to recognize the work that's currently being done by the People of Color Caucus, as well as the formation of the Racial Justice Council by the governor's office. We need to pass legislation that makes racism a public health crisis. We also need to address the history of institutional racism, considering the history of racism in Oregon, including the development perhaps of an office that addresses racial equity and social justice, that looks at policy, state resources, based on the recommendations from the Racial Justice Council and from the People of Color legislation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. The next question is going to go to the Marion County Clerks, and the question that I'm going to read is from Community Partners. Danielle Gonzalez, you'll be the first one to read it, just a heads up. And the question is, what have you done or what would you do to ensure that disenfranchised parts of the community are registered to vote? How would you ensure that voters whose first language is not English feel like part of the voting process? Danielle, please answer this question.
Thank you very much for this question. I appreciate a question that's really focused on how do we improve voter turnout and how do we help people become better civic citizens. So I can speak to what I've done in the past. Again, I said that I worked for a member of Congress. I worked in there for 10 years, and I worked with immigrants as they were working through their immigration status. And with that, I was able to do things. I was able to tell people sometimes that they were US citizens by law and they didn't even know it. And the flush of excitement and understanding that they would have access to their ability to vote and to voice their concerns. So I'm speaking directly to a lot of people that haven't had that right before, or they're low English learners. My husband is from Mexico. My 3 kids are Latino students at Salem-Keizer. We have to do better in making sure that multiple languages are available in our voters' pamphlets, in our information on how to run for office. I know that's something I struggled with, is just getting information on how to run for office. There's so many things that we can do to improve that. There's everything from language lines, there's working through the census and making sure that people are being accounted for, and then going through the redistricting process and making sure that their voices are heard in the redistricting process. So there's a lot of things that we can do as county clerks to advocate for voters and low English learners to be able to fully exercise their right and their voice. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Bill Burgess, this question is for you too. Would you like me to repeat it?
Sure.
Okay, the question from community partners is, what have you done or what would you do to ensure that disenfranchised parts of the community are registered to vote? How would you ensure that voters whose first language is not English feel like part of the voting process? Bill, it's all yours.
Okay, we've worked hard to try to get people in our office that can speak Spanish, and we have 3 people now that can do that. I think that helps some, but we're also trying to overcome some other impediments to help people vote. And part of that is civics, just teaching civics in school to make sure that people understand the importance of voting. As far as the people that have a second language problem, we don't seem to have, at least it has not been brought to my attention, that we have many folks that are in that particular situation that want to vote and all, because we've done everything we could with automatic voter registration. We've increased the number of registered voters from 66% to over 90% now. And so I think we're getting the ballot into the hands of most everybody. Now, if they're having a hard time understanding it or responding, I think we need to work on that. And there are organizations that are doing that. Paccoon does a really good job, and some other organizations have done a good job too in that particular, in the areas that they're working. But we have to continue to find different ways to reach people. And to me, it's imperative, but it's like changing society. It's sort of like when we started with people with doing recycling. It didn't work going to the parents, it worked going to the kids. I think the whole culture of feeling that it's important to vote certainly has to come from the ground up, from education. And we'll provide the mechanics for people.
Thank you so much, Bill. And I'll hand it off to Julianne.
Also from our community partners, just as a heads up, Jackie Leung, this is coming to you first. Immigrants and people of color in Oregon have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Many immigrants are the backbone of our communities, and as essential workers, including farm workers who've continued to work during the pandemic and wildfires, what would you do to provide assistance to immigrant Oregonians and businesses owned by people of color during and after this pandemic? Would you support additional funding to help undocumented workers and their families?
Thank you for that question. You've asked, I think, 3 parts to it, so I'll try my best to answer all 3 within the time limit that I have. So first and foremost, when it comes to who makes up, who does the bulk of the work, especially for our economy, it is the work and specifically from our immigrant community. They do a lot of the work specifically in our farm work, our housekeeping, all the different areas that we take for granted. Even though COVID took over and even the wildfires took over, who was still out there? Who was still plowing away? Who was still out there in the fields? Our farm workers. Who was still working in cleaning places or in other locations where our immigrant community is located? These same workers. We need to recognize how much work and effort that they have done, especially like how our workforce is not possible without them. So in terms of, I believe another part of your question that asked about ensuring that our immigrant businesses and that our workers in general, our essential workers are given the protections that they need. I mean, for example, when we had the funding that came from the CARES Act last month, that was an additional, I think, $400 or $500. The process was people had to stand in line outside of certain banks, wait all day. I saw people who were lined up. They had tents and everything to even sleep before the night so they wouldn't lose their space. We need to ensure that we don't have that happen again if we're able to continue getting funding. We need to ensure that we have a set aside dedicated times, or at least providing those resources that are available to people in their respective languages. This not including not only like Spanish, but also the other languages that make up the diversity in Oregon. There was times when, for example, we had COVID. My organization was contacted to do some translations, but the turnaround required us to do it like within the same day, and we couldn't make it culturally specific to our communities. So we also have to make sure when it comes to any kind of resources, any kind of guidance, that we are doing it in a trauma-informed way that also allows each of those organizations or entities to actually work as partners. That includes making sure that when it comes to language translations, accessibility, that it is according to what the cultural needs and the community needs are. And I'm
awesome.
out of
time. Thank you so much. And Ashley Carson Cottingham, you are next. Did you want me to repeat the question?
Sure, that would be great.
All right. So immigrants and people of color in Oregon have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Many immigrants are the backbone of our communities as essential workers, including farm workers who have continued to work during the pandemic and wildfires. What would you do to provide assistance to immigrant Oregonians and businesses owned by people of color during and after this pandemic? Would you support additional funding to help undocumented workers and their families?
Thank you. So, yeah, that's a hard question to answer in 2 minutes, but I'll do my best. I think that COVID-19 and the wildfires have absolutely highlighted that, you know, our farm workers and frontline workers, essential workers, and particularly those working in long-term care have been hit so hard. And I would make it a top priority to get personal protective equipment that's needed to protect people who are bringing us our food and taking care of our elderly. It's truly not acceptable to me that 6 months into a global pandemic, that people don't have safe living conditions, who are bringing us our food, who are out in the fields picking, who aren't able to protect themselves from fire and horrible pesticides. And then, you know, we have the majority of the fatalities from COVID are occurring in nursing homes and other long-term care settings. And caregivers are accidentally, unknowingly bringing the virus in, and then it impacts the population living there, because we're not equipping these essential workers with everything they need, which includes what Jackie had mentioned, all of the information in multiple languages about the risks and the PPE that's needed to prevent the transmission of the virus. As County Commissioner, I will work tirelessly to engage our BIPOC business owners to talk about what they need to be successful, and to work to ensure that grant funding, additional state legislative funding, and that federal funding that we advocate continue to flow to our state, and that it go to the small businesses that are our BIPOC small businesses, because we know that first round went to a lot of businesses that were struggling, but probably didn't need to take that federal funding. I'll close with saying I think it's atrocious what our country has done, and a massive violation of human rights to our undocumented population. I have great respect for people who are trying to move to our country to get better work opportunities and to protect their families from violence. I'm proud of our state for passing healthcare coverage for undocumented youth. And I think we need to do the right thing and expand other coverage to all people who are undocumented that need healthcare.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. Brian Clem, you're up next. Did you need me to repeat the question?
I think I got it.
All right.
So first thing I want to say, of the long list of things that Donald Trump has done wrong, probably the most egregious is attacks on immigrants and the demonization of people who work extremely hard. Is something that the most important thing I can do, and any of us can do, frankly, for the next 20 some days, is do everything they can to get him out of office. Let me just start with that. Now, I have voted for these programs that we just talked about. I voted for Cover All Kids. I voted for the driver's license bill for undocumented folks 2 or 3 times. I voted for the reproductive health equity, which was a tough vote, honestly. Lots of people didn't agree with public funding of abortions for people regardless of citizenship status. I voted for it because I do believe in equal treatment. But I do also believe that there's more to do. We allocated $30 million. I chair the House Ag Committee. We held hearings on the special circumstances around farm workers and COVID. We allocated $30 million to the agricultural sector to try, and I encouraged the governor to do so, and we did, to try and provide more hand washing sanitation stations at closer intervals in the fields, et cetera, et cetera. So those are important things that we did, and I was proud to help, but I think there will be more. I wish COVID was going to be gone like a miracle right after November, like Donald Trump said, but I don't think it's going to be. And these are people who we're now calling people essential workers. Immigrants are the backbones of our country. Farm workers have always been essential workers. They've always been essential workers. Now let me dart back for a second to the school resource thing again. I'm sorry. I didn't know in May of, I guess it was 2018, when Raul and David Salinas ran for the school board. I gave Raul $500 in his race against Marty Hyan. I didn't know her politics. I didn't know anything about her. I knew Raul and what an incredible young man he was and what he could do for our community. I should have given him every other penny I had, because he could have won that race with just a little more help, and we would not have the school board chair we have now. So that discussion that we're trying to have, and it's a real one, about parents concerned about school shootings and they like having police there versus parents worried about their kid being put in prison when they should have just got a talking to by the teacher. Our school board is not in a very good position to have it. And if David and Raul will run again, I will help either one of them or anybody else get on that school board. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian. And Jack L.S., you are next. Did you need me to repeat the question?
I don't believe so, thank you.
Okay.
I have to start out by saying one simple thing. I disagree with 90% of what Mr. Clem just stated, starting with the President of the United States and right on down. That was not, in my mind, the purpose of this forum. With that said, let's address COVID-19. COVID-19 is a terrible situation that's overtaken our nation. But the question was directed basically at farm workers. I'll stretch that a little further to most low-income workers. And they seem to be more susceptible because of health reasons or whatever. I believe to help them the most, what we could have done is got on top of the testing of the high-risk areas more astute and tested these people, and the ones that came up positive, get them treated immediately and out of the society they were working in. I think them being there spread the disease among the other workers out in the field. Because I grew up on a farm. When you're out in that field, you aren't going to wear a mask. It's too restrictive for the production. You're working hard, you're perspiring. It's a pain in the neck. You aren't going to stay 6 feet apart. It's not in the work. So they should have been given more consideration. Now, you asked the question of what would I do for undocumented aliens? Well, number one, the testing I mentioned earlier would be essential to where we identified people that tested positive. With that said, undocumented aliens are illegal aliens, defined illegal. They have already broken the law. I agree they want to improve themselves, but do it the right way. I believe that anybody, undocumented alien, tested positive should be taken care of and treated just as heavily as President Trump was in this last week. Those undocumented aliens that tested negative, I think, should go home. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. And we are going to move on to our county clerk questions. Bill Burgess, you will be first. All right, so this question is from the Salem-Keizer NAACP. This election season, there has been a lot of discussion surrounding voter intimidation and suppression. In Marion County, a plan to add more ballot boxes was actually voted down by the county commission. Do you think that was the right decision? And what would you do to remove barriers to voting, particularly in communities of color?
Okay, as far as the ballot boxes, whoops, I gotta unmute myself here. Muted. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, good. Okay, great. Okay, as far as the ballot boxes, I was attempting to get some more 24/7 outdoor ballot boxes, which are much safer during the pandemic and are easier to manage. And it seemed like the right thing to do. We started working on that in June, and we talked with the manufacturer. We had 10 lined up to go and all. And we had some CARES Act funding that we were going to use for that. That CARES Act funding evaporated twice. And so I went to the commissioners asking for them to expedite making sure that I had the spending authority, number one, and number two, to make sure that the process would go through quickly to where I could buy the boxes. And they denied that request, feeling that we're a vote by mail state, and feeling that people could vote by mail, and possibly that they could also, those cities should open up for them to vote in, because we had 9 sites that were closed the last election because of the pandemic and for people's safety. So I was able to go out anyhow and get some funding to get some of those boxes in. I just got a large grant fund from the Zuckerberg group. And so we are getting some of those boxes in right now. We're also going to be able to do some other improvements. As far as this particular election, there are a lot of other concerns you talked about, you know, the cybersecurity, safety concerns, physical intimidation, misinformation, all those types of things. We stepped up our game quite a bit in the areas that we can have some influence in. And certainly we're trying to, with the misinformation part, trying to make sure that the press comes to us with any questions, and people, we invite any citizen that's got any question whatsoever, they see something that's a little suspicious looking, don't spread it on Facebook. First call us and let's see if we can find out what the truth is and try to take care of that. I'm sure there was more to the question, but I'm out of time.
All right, thank you so much. And Danielle Gonzalez, you are next. Did you need me to repeat the question?
If you could, that would be great.
Okay. This election season, there has been a lot of discussion about voter intimidation and suppression. In Marion County, there was a plan to add more ballot boxes that was voted down by the county commission. Do you think that was the right decision? And what would you do to remove barriers to voting, particularly for communities of color?
Thank you very much for that question. I don't know if it was the right decision. And the reason is the story that was put in the newspaper really didn't have many details of where and when that decision was made. I know from working at the county that our budgets are due well in advance, and the county clerk would have had an opportunity to make sure that ballot boxes were available well before. The COVID really hit our county starting in March. And if you're planning ahead for upcoming elections in May, there was less ballot boxes already there. So there should have been a plan, I think, in place. And so I kind of put that on the shoulders of the county clerk, because sometimes you have to plan ahead and make sure that all of your resources are available well before you have a problem. The ballot boxes here, we have ballot boxes in Salem and Keizer at Roth's. I don't see why there's not an opportunity to be able to do those same types of things out in some of those rural communities. So if it's safe enough to put it at Roth's, it seems to me that it'd be safe enough to be able to put them out into these other rural communities at a lower cost. And also making sure that you're giving everybody an opportunity to send in their ballots. Now, of course, my biggest concern right now for the people of Marion County are the ones that are currently displaced or recently displaced from the Santiam fires. And those are communities that I am very familiar with, that I work with on a regular basis. And so I know that their location for their mail ballots has moved multiple different times. And up until election day, they may not necessarily know where their ballot is going. So that is a big concern for me. Now, when it comes to the misinformation, this election is absolutely about combating misinformation, but you can only do that if you have real information available. And unfortunately, I have found that the website for the county clerk's office doesn't really have good, strong information that is an easily readable format. And so we have to do everything we can to protect the people from intimidation and vote suppression. Luckily, with mail-in voting, it actually reduces that as an option. And so I appreciate that very much. But voting access and voting equity and election integrity are absolutely the hallmarks of democracy. And it's something that all of my focus will be on when I'm elected. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much, Danielle. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Angelique, and she'll get you started on your next question.
All right, so the next question is from community partners, and it's going to go to Jack S. first, just to let you know. And the question is, how will you work to ensure the funding of vital social and housing programs that support the well-beings of families of color and low-income families? What would be your plan for providing affordable or public housing for people in need? Jack, please answer that question.
That's a far-reaching question, and to answer it, right now in the Salem specific area, housing is at a very high premium. I do notice that there is a lot of construction going on. Much of that, I'm sure, is going for low-income housing, as some that have previously been completed recently are low income. Now, how do we ensure this? By working with the contractors and making it less restrictive, less regulation on building a house, getting rid of, not a house, apartment complex, getting rid of some of the superficial regulations that are in existence right now, and get it to where the contractors and the investors can put up quality multiple units in a more proficient, efficient method and time period. With that, then the next question is getting the information to those citizens that are qualified for that service. Some of it will probably end up being subsidized. And this is through the various social agencies that you have mentioned in the past and several of our other candidates have mentioned. But it takes a joint effort to accomplish this. It takes the city council, takes the county commissioners, it's going to take the state legislature, working together as a team to address this problem. And how far down the list you go is something that I'm not qualified to answer right here tonight, but it's something that needs to be looked at. I think I'll just stop at that.
Thank you, Jack. Okay, the question is next going to go to Brian Clem. Brian, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, I'm okay, thank you.
Okay.
So I chair the land use committee in Oregon, and I just held a hearing actually about 10 days ago on the various bills we've passed to try and produce more affordable housing. We've tried different pilot projects to expand the urban growth boundaries. We are looking at those regulatory barriers inside the city limits. I have passed out of my committee House Bill 2003, and in another committee I voted for House Bill 2001, and that aims to change our building codes to be able to allow that middle housing so more and more can be built, and it's a supply issue in a large degree. We need more housing, period. The other part of it was, how do you work to ensure funding of vital social programs and housing programs? Well, sometimes you got to take really hard votes. Like, I voted for the corporate activities tax. I got a bunch of other business owners, and I'm one too. They're mad at me for voting for that, but that's how you fund these things. Sometimes you have to take tough votes. And so sometimes that means raising taxes. I voted for a tax increase back early in my career on wealthy people and businesses, Measure 66, 67. So sometimes you have to take tough votes, and I've taken them, and I'm not in any way embarrassed to have done it. One thing I want to say, because this might be my last question, is I heard Jack's reaction to my last comment. Jack is a good person. Jack's got a lot of courage for coming on here tonight. He's a Republican coming on what is traditionally thought of as a not friendly turf. I want all Republicans to know I'm one of the most bipartisan people in the Capitol. I received from Newt Bueller the award for most bipartisan legislator. I have never, ever in my committee had a party line vote. Donald Trump is not a Republican. He is a racist. And I don't lightly use a forum to please beg people to eject him from office, but people of color, including my wife and children, can't take 4 more years. And I don't want to drag Jack into that mess. He's a normal Republican. That's not what the President of the United States has done to us. So please spend your next 20 some days voting for him. If you can vote for me, great, but not voting for him, working to remove him. If you can vote for me, great, but please vote for somebody like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. The question is now going to go to Jackie Leung. Jackie, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, I don't think you need to repeat the question. Thank you for checking.
Okay, you can start now.
Thank you. So we need housing that is affordable for working families. I have heard from countless community members who are concerned about 2 things. 1, having affordable place to rent or to own, and 2, a stronger emphasis on Oregon's homelessness. Senior citizens are one of the largest growing communities in Oregon who are becoming homeless. This is concerning. A number of the homeless community actually consists of people who've lived in Oregon for years. Does it make them less of an Oregonian? No. If anything, they're an Oregonian even though they don't have a home. The results of COVID-19 and the wildfires have resulted in a large number of displaced individuals and families who've lost their homes, who've lost their jobs. And as a result, we're also seeing a larger number of people who are displaced who are homeless as well. So first, regarding affordable housing, as a state, we have to work better at the county, at the city, and especially on the federal level on addressing having housing that's affordable. This includes perhaps offering additional affordable options for renters, expanding upon programs such as individual development accounts or IDAs to enable participants to earn funds, whether it's to earn enough to have a down payment for a home, pay for their rent, or other opportunities that helps them move forward. We also need to ensure that our current homeowners are not priced out of their homes due to the rising cost of property taxes or other utility bills. For our homeless community, our unsheltered, we need to look into programs such as building permanent sustainable housing models that have on-site support. Portland has been able to establish one. Salem just opened one called the Redwood Crossing. We need more to help our growing homeless crisis. In addition, the Cahoots model, which was implemented in Eugene and some other locations, has been shown to be successful. And that is something that we as a state should look into supporting at a statewide level. On a larger note, we also need to recognize that we've had a decline in mental health support that has significantly harmed our community. We must prioritize mental health and in the process, improve the health and lives of all Oregonians. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And finally, this question will go to Ashley Carson Cottingham. Ashley, do you need me to repeat the question?
No, I think I have it. Thank you.
Okay.
So I will work tirelessly as county commissioner to increase the number of low and moderate income housing options that are available to the people in our county. I truly believe that the people that live in Marion County that work in Marion County should be able to live in Marion County and should not be priced out of our county. And I think there's several ways to do this, but one thought is that we could do this by looking at the vacant buildings that we see around Salem-Keizer, the vacant lots, and really focus on how do we build density within our communities. I would really prefer not to look at expanding the urban growth boundaries prior to focusing on what we can do with population density in our city centers. I think at the county level and the city level, we could work to incentivize developers by giving property tax breaks over time with strings attached. So, that the housing units would be, that a certain percentage of housing units would need to be set aside for low to moderate income families and workers. Also, I'm of the philosophy that we should fully leverage federal funding to increase our supply of low income Section 8 housing. And so I would like to seek those opportunities and maximize those opportunities, because I think that housing is a human right and we need to get people into dry and warm spaces. The rainy season is upon us. I would echo many of the things that Jackie mentioned around Cahoots and the fact that we need to also invest in supported and supportive housing models. So this would be housing plus wraparound services, which can help people stay permanently housed for longer and be independent with that right amount of support being offered. My background is in health and human services. So as county commissioner, I will work tirelessly to advocate for the funding needed to keep those services flowing to our communities, and in particular, our communities of color. I want to make sure that those most in need in our county are getting what they need from our county government.
Thank you so much, Ashley. The next question is going to be for the Marion County Clerks. Danielle, you'll be answering it first, and it's from community partners. The question is, what is your plan to help educate youth and others in the community around the importance of local elections? How would you specifically target voters from communities of color?
Thank you very much for this question. So one of my most favorite things that I ever got to do was actually helping to educate young people through internships and things like that. There's a lot that a county clerk can do when it comes to civics education, nonpartisan civics education. And it's one of the most important things we can do. But the way you reach out to young people is to show and to help them understand how valuable their voice is in this world. And one of the ways to do that is making sure that our civics education includes voices that are like theirs, making sure that we have diverse representation in our offices and making sure that we have diverse representation when it comes to educating our youth. So I would say the most important thing that I would do is is help with building a civics model or a civics education piece that we could help local teachers and administrators to build upon that's consistent and helpful for the students as they become soon to be voters. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Bill, you're going to answer the question next. Do you need me to repeat it for you?
No, I don't think so. For schools, certainly civics education is just so essential for kids. And right now, it's not one of the things that's being emphasized, and we need to really have that emphasized quite a bit more. I've gone and spoken in schools, at classrooms from elementary school all the way on up through high school, gone to auditoriums and talked to people about registering to vote, and all, gone with the governor to do that. I think the last one was, I think, was at State and High School. But that's just a little bit. It really needs to be a cultural value to vote and to be educated, and for especially people of color to think that it matters, to know that it matters, to know how much people have done before them, and know that once they know the history, they may take more pride in both the civil rights movement and the women's movement that helped extend the franchise quite a bit. And so certainly as a League of Women Voters member too, for over 30 years, we certainly promote voter education and promote voter registration. There are some curriculum that have been developed through the Secretary of State's office that can be used. But even with the League of Women Voters, I know they've had a really hard time trying to make civics, bring it up to level again to where it used to be and where it really needs to be in the future for people. And I'm certainly willing to come talk to any group at any time about voter registration or the mechanics of voting or any other part of elections.
Thank you so much, Bill.
Just kidding. All right. So we're going to move on to our last question. And this is kind of a combination of our viewers' questions. And here we go. Brian Clem, you're going to be the first one on this one. What should communities know about you that we haven't asked? And what should be done to address increased visibility and activity of white supremacy in Oregon? And to make it even harder, we're going to give you a minute and a half.
Okay. Well, you know, we've covered a lot of territory. As I mentioned, I've been in office for a while here, and I'm a dad, and I'm a husband, and a community member. And I got to tell you, I hadn't been anywhere in public around people until George Floyd was murdered. I have a mom, she's back here, she has Alzheimer's, I take care of her. I don't want to get her sick and have her die. My dad had cancer and I didn't want it, but that moment compelled me to go to a rally. Now I was nervous. I was like, is everyone staying 6 feet away? Do I have my mask? But, you know, I don't know by looking at the average fat, bald white guy like I am, if you would know that, but this is the moment to do something about racial inequities in this country. There isn't going to come another one anytime soon. So I hope folks know that I'm an ally, but I'm not a white savior, grab the mic guy. So I'll help when you ask me to. I'll offer support. But this is a very important time in our country. Just now I received an email that my hometown of Coos Bay last night, the Democratic Party's office was attacked. That's my hometown. And again, there are white nationalists on the march. They're not embarrassed anymore to be proud and in the streets. This is one of the most dangerous times I've ever even heard of in our country. So part of it, and it may be considered rude, it's taking and using my bully pulpit in a forum like this to call that out. And I usually am not like that, but I'm pissed and I'm scared. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Brian. And next is Ashley Carson Cottingham. Would you like me to repeat the questions?
I'm sure that'd be great.
All right, hey, Betty. All right, so what should communities of color know about you that we haven't asked? And what do you think should be done to address the increased visibility and activity of white supremacy in Oregon?
Sorry, he needed to say goodnight to his mom. I think they've about had it with me running for office. So I'd like to say I'm very committed to doing the work to gain the trust of the BIPOC communities. I want to take strong action to ensure that the county can dismantle the systems that are in place that lead to inequity. I believe that government has a central role in doing that. Government helped put these, systemically racist structures in place, and we in government working with community partners can dismantle it. It's going to take working together. It's going to be hard work, but I will listen and I will continue to show up. I will continue to march in the streets. I will continue to go to vigils. I hope we don't have to have more vigils. And I will make mistakes. And I will learn from the mistakes because I'm committed to doing this work. I'm going to do the best I can to be the best ally I possibly can be. I'm okay with people calling me out and telling me when I make those mistakes because I know that I can learn and I can grow. Again, I'm just committed to making sure that county services are provided in an equitable manner to all the people living in our county. And I absolutely agree with Representative Clem. We have to call out the white supremacist actions that are occurring in our communities. It's scary, it's despicable, it's disgusting. We have graffiti, we have swastika flags. This is in our community and it's not okay. This is not a way of life for anyone. And I implore all of us to stand up against this type of bigoted behavior.
All right, thank you so much, Ashley. Jackie Leung, 1:30 seconds. And I'll kind of preface this differently. What should be done to address the increased visibility and activity of white supremacy in Oregon? And is there anything communities of color should know about you that we haven't asked?
Great, thank you so much. So I discussed quite a bit about my values and my passion. I'm a mother of 4 children. I balance work, family, serving in office, running for office, and being a teacher for my children, especially now with remote learning. We need working parents and caregivers in office. We need more representation of the communities that make up Oregon. My priorities are centered on public health, evidence-based practices, and ensuring that our communities know who represent them. As state representative, it is vital that our elected leaders represent our community. This means showing up to do the work. This means voting based on information, sound policy, and community outreach. I am tired of the partisan divide that is happening in the US and here in Oregon. There was a time that both sides worked together. I pledge to work alongside other elected representatives. I pledge to not walk out. It is conduct unbecoming of us. And this means working in our community and meeting with them. It means ensuring we hire employees and volunteers who represent our community, ensuring that language and accessible resources are available, and we need to recognize the value in enriching work and community that of our workers. I pledge to show up, vote based on informed decisions, on sound evidence and community feedback. We need to be held accountable for our actions. We may disagree on policy, but as long as our conversations are civil and engaged and not include anything racist, sexist, or any ism in there, that's causing harm to our communities. My door and phone remains open. I cannot do it without our community members. Let's do this together. Together we can, together we shall, and together we will. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And Danielle Gonzalez, did you need me to repeat the question or you got it?
Please, if you would repeat it just one more time.
Sure. What should be done to address the increased visibility and activity of white supremacy in Oregon? And what should communities of color know about you that we haven't asked?
Yeah, so I would say what we can do is actually offset the misinformation of the way the world is seen through their eyes. And very honestly, sometimes we have to treat it like we would child soldiers. And really look at what in our education system is encouraging people to lash out to others. And so I think that this is something that we need to do, claim back our communities that are peaceful and welcoming. And that's something that it's hard to do from a county clerk position, but the county clerk position is part of the community, and making sure that people feel welcome and safe is part of our responsibility. So then moving to the question of what should communities of color know about me that wasn't asked. So I'm a mom first. I work in economic development for the county. I have 3 ridiculously awesome kids and an even more ridiculously cute husband. And been married 23 years. I work in economic development for the county. I have helped communities grow the way they want to grow. And I'm really good at it. And I think I could also bring that to the county clerk's position. I have spent many, many years serving the people and serving them with integrity and serving them with their own human dignity. And it's something I'm very proud of. I would hope that they could also see that in me, that it's truly a genuine and authentic place for me. But I would say vote for Danielle and take a chance on somebody that's not an incumbent. I think that's really important for people to get for some fresh perspective. And so I appreciate very much everyone's time tonight.
All right, thank you so much. Jack L. Did you need me to repeat the question?
No, I think I've got what I want to say. As far as what do you need to know about me that hasn't been brought up, I am not a prejudiced person. I was raised that way. I went through in a prejudiced town. I grew up in Medford, Oregon, where when I was growing up, a Black person was not allowed to spend the night in Medford. Harlem Globetrotters came to town, entertained. They were put on a Pullman car and pulled out of the city limits. To me, this is atrocious type action. It's gone now, which is great. I went on to college, and several of my good friends were Black from the South. And one of them made a comment that stuck with me for a number of years. He said the hardest thing for him to realize when he came to Corvallis was when he walked into a business and people said, welcome, they meant it. This is the type of atmosphere we need throughout Oregon, throughout the nation, and for that matter, throughout the world. What can we do about white supremacy? I looked to Portland real quick. And with the riots that have gone on, and many of the white supremacists have been arrested, but the DA up there won't prosecute, which to me is a total ludicrous situation. We need to enforce our laws. With doing that, we will terminate much of what is happening negative in these respects. It needs to come from our leaders, our mayor in Portland, our governor here in the state, have both failed in this respect. And I think for the total population of Oregon, these things need to be addressed and our laws need to be enforced. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jack. LS, we appreciate that. And Bill Burgess, last but certainly not least, did you need me to repeat the question?
No, I've got it. You're talking about white supremacy and what we need to do about it. Decency and respect is important for everybody, and it's important that we really stretch that to anybody, no matter their ability, no matter their race or their sexual orientation or any other thing, or like Jackie likes to call any other ism, everybody's inalienably given the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that means we need to treat each person that way. That's on us to do that. When you see racism, you need to speak out against it. Now, I've been graciously, well, I've been asked to speak at a couple Black Lives Rally Matters, and it was quite an honor to be able to do that. I think that anytime we get a chance to speak, no matter what level, to bring equity to this world, that's really important. It also means that when we go to the ballot box and we vote, we look at the candidates, and we certainly do not want to vote for a candidate that espouses division or hate or that type of thing. Certainly, we've seen so much more in white supremacy the last maybe 3 years than that we would normally see, and we need to get that back in the jar. We need to make sure that the values of decency for all prevail, and we can do that. 103, let's see, 3 years from now, we'll be having the celebration of the getting rid of the exclusion laws in Oregon. And that was the law that if you were a Negro, a mulatto, or a Chinaman, you weren't allowed in Oregon, weren't allowed to own property and things like that. Was finally gotten rid of, but the spirit still stayed there. Even though the law stayed there, it took a while, and still taking a while. We're still fighting that. If it weren't for that law, I wouldn't be allowed to live in this state. And so I'm proud that we got rid of that law, and we have to continue on to make sure that our kids and our grandkids have the opportunity and don't have the type of opposition that we've had as we've grown forward.
All right, so it looks like we have come to the end of the night. I want to thank all of you candidates for your participation. Brian Clem, Ashley Carson Cottingham, excuse me, Jacqueline Leung, Danielle Gonzalez, Jack L. Esp, and Bill Burgess. We thank you. We'd like to thank our audience for joining us this evening, my co-moderator, Angelique Prater, and both of our interpreters, Katrina Watton and Bethany Renata Loberg. We'd also like to give a special thanks to our partners in CC Media, Grant Bachman, Wendy Brokaw, Tim Marchuka, and their production team. They've done a great job doing all 3 nights of this. It's been definitely a task, so we appreciate them. And for rebroadcasts of all of these forums, check with our media partners, KMU's Community Radio and KTUP Radio Poder. You can also watch the recording of this forum at the same link on YouTube. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a great night.
All candidates on the November general election ballot running in local and regional races serving the Salem-Keizer area were invited to participate in the recorded broadcast using public campaign information. All candidates who responded by the September 21st deadline were scheduled. The NAACP does not endorse candidates. The candidates did not receive questions in advance, but were all granted equal time for their statements and to answer questions. The NAACP Salem-Keizer Branch is the executive producer of Salem-Keizer NAACP candidate forums and responsible for the contents of this program. Comments and questions should be directed to NAACP Salem-Keizer Branch at salemkeizernAACP@gmail.com.